still muted? I always have problems at the beginning of the show. I'm surprised I didn't have problems. But anyway, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic podcast. I'm really fascinated with my guest today. The information she's going to bring, it's really cool stuff. It's going to be on Atlantis, Lemuria, the Mer People. I'm fascinated by these topics. And who I have with me is Ameera Atlantis or Ameera Beth. Either, I think she goes by Ameera. Which one do you prefer?
My professional name is Mer Atlantis, so that's just fine. That's how you can find me on all my social medias and my website.
Okay. And she's a multidimensional teacher and healer for the return of the new Atlantis rising. As an incarnated mer being, she serves as a bridge between worlds, water and the earthly. Ameera's focus is to restore the law of one and seven spiritual laws of Atlantis. She is an advanced past life regression therapist, creator of the Atlantean 13 chakra and light body activation, and steward of the Temple of the New Atlantis. And yeah, and I really want to welcome her to the show. Thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. It's another beautiful day on the island of Kauai.
Yeah. So, one thing I wanted to start off with, you gave me some topics to touch on, but let's just get a background about how you kind of got into this. This all started with a past life regression, right?
It did. Yep. Yes. So, when I went through my spiritual awakening about maybe 15 years ago, I had a very kind of abrupt awakening, like the 2x4 to the back of the head, that shocked me out of my sleeping state and propelled me into this, this path that I was destined to participate in. And so when that happened, I did what most of us do when we go through our spiritual awakening. I started reading everything I could get my hands on and, watching YouTube and learning and talking, going to healers and teachers and psychics and all of that to try to figure out this whole thing called, spiritual mission and ascension. And at one point, kind of early in my awakening, it was maybe a year and a half into it, and I was just reading everything I could get my hands on to try and figure out who I was and what I was supposed to be doing in the world, because it was clear that I was meant to be more than just a wife and a mother. Previous to that, I'd been living, in the suburbs and was married and had 3 young children, driving a minivan, just living that white picket fence life that you're kind of told or were kind of born and bred into if you're born into a traditional family. And I really thought that was going to be my life until I had my awakening. And one day I was sitting in my meditation chair and my arms began to move on their own independently, and these kind of moving, swimmy motions. And I opened my eyes to see them doing this, and I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that there was some kind of an internal force or energy rising up through me, and my entire body would move and sway independently of my will or independently of me asking it to. So played around with that for a little while, and I discovered that if I moved my hands around, my children or the person I was married to, I could take away headaches. I could soothe them. Like things were happening in what I was discovering were chakras or energy centers. So in my quest to find out more about what this was, I went to a past life regression facilitator. And she put me on.
Let me ask you a question. Did you know anything about past life regression?
I did. I'd been reading Brian Weiss and some Dolores Cannon, and was very, very curious about past lives and what that meant. And that was kind of what propelled me to go have a session for myself and find out what this was. And so she put me in hypnosis on the couch. And I immediately saw myself or found myself swimming down into the ocean towards an underwater city, doing this, like leaping up and down on her couch, like very somatically exclaiming, I'm a mermaid. And I see Atlantis under the ocean. And I didn't even think mermaids were a real thing back then. And I thought for sure this woman is going to think I'm insane. Like she's going to think I'm crazy. But of course she didn't. She just kept asking into it, tell me more and continue on and asking me these questions that allowed me to go deeper and deeper into this extremely physical, not only mental experience. And it was also a very emotional experience. And, one thing for anybody who's had a past life regression, it's really the emotional connection we feel to that experience that shows us it's real. It doesn't come from here. It comes from, like, for me, reuniting with this essence, this part of my soul stream that was Mer, and looking down into Atlantis, which I later realized was Merlantis, the Mer kingdom, and bringing back all this information from my higher self that, that just started to put the pieces of the puzzle together about who I am, where I originated from, why I'm here, and how I am to begin to execute this information out, in real time in the world. So I came out of the trance and I was like, whoa. And fortunately she recorded it. So I had, evidence of what I had gone through, which is very important, I think, to continue to validate and get you to step back into your experience that it is as it is really true for your soul. And that experience changed the trajectory of my life so intensely that I decided to go through 3 levels of training with this woman. She became my mentor and my teacher for regression therapy and soul progression therapy, so I could begin to take other people into their own other life, because there's no past, present, and future. It's simultaneous. Everything's happening to us once, where we are multi-dimensional. We are multidimensional beings experiencing many realms and realities simultaneously when we're able to tap into that safely. Safely meaning there are some people, like a person with schizophrenia, in my knowingness, is someone who is accessing too many realms and realities, and they can't ground into who they are in this reality. It scatters them, it fragments them. And so regression allows us to tap into those other realms and realities, bring back information, but still stay grounded into, present life, this reality, this timeline, and our human physical body.
Yeah, I wanted to run something by you. I had like 4 or 5 regressions done, I would say. Like I've done a lot of hypnotic regressions, so I'm real familiar with them. And now
Right.
I kept regressing back to lives where I was either shot in the chest or I was like stabbed in the chest. And
Uh-huh.
I wasn't getting any clarification on what that meant, besides like maybe I lived like short lives in those lives. And
Okay.
I felt like that maybe like I was like worried about, because I was always worried about wasting time in this life. I thought like wasting
Yeah.
time was a huge thing. Then one of my subscribers said to me, they said, maybe it was preparing you for the heartache that you were going to go through in this life, because
Mm-hmm.
the person that I was with, I thought was going to be like really substantial. So I don't know if that shot in the chest was metaphorical for something that I was going to experience in this life, or if that was actually an actual past life that happened, and that's why I feel like I'm always wasting time. It could be
Yeah.
both though. What do you
Can
think?
I give you my thoughts on that?
Yeah.
So whenever you go into a regression or another realm, it's really important to set an intention for your higher self, of like, what do we want to know, or where do we want to go to explain something about ourselves that will help us on this timeline. So when you went into yours, was it like just kind of a random thing, let's go into a lifetime and see what happens, or did you actually set an intention with your facilitator?
I thought I set an intention, but it ended up being random. It ended up being like multiple lives in each session. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
So then when anytime that I see patterns, and I work with a lot of people who have pattern lifetimes, just like you experienced, typically the reason is that your higher self or your oversoul is trying to heal something in these other realms of reality and give you a story or message for this lifetime. And the goal would be at the end to ask you to go deeper into, after the death process, to go deeper into why you were shown this lifetime and how it's relevant to you in this lifetime. So I don't know if your facilitators did that, but that's what I would do. Is like, why are we here? We set this intention, this happened. Why was it important for Rob to learn about this lifetime or these lifetimes where he's shot in the chest? And then you would be able to connect with that information and bring that back and have the solutions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back into those. I mean, I have a couple of them. I probably should watch them because I posted a couple of my regressions on my channel, but they're way back. Like, like we did them. I think but it's just it was definitely interesting though. I mean, I try
Yeah.
to. Let me ask you this: like, Atlantis, like how did you find out you were from Atlantis, and that, or were you from Merlantis? I'm trying to understand the difference. Like,
So I am an incarnated Atlantean mer being. So the mer beings are from the underwater, the sister city to Atlantis, known as Merlantis. That's not what we called it, but that would be the closest translation in, like, say, this time, or in English, And
yeah,
so my role and the role of many of the Mer people were to assist the Atlanteans when they incarnated into third dimensional bodies from their fifth dimensional above realities. Because and I mostly report on, or am responsible to bring forward information from the last fall, which is about 13,000 years ago, known as the Golden Age of Atlantis. Okay, so there were 5 different incarnations of Atlantis, 5 different rising and fallings. My major participation with the Atlanteans as a Mer was in the 5th and final fall. So many of us had the job, or took on the task of shapeshifting, coming up out of the water near the Temple of Poseidon, shape-shifting into coming onto land, and to assist the Atlanteans with their, newfound bodies, at physical bodies, on it being in 3D, 5 senses, trying to figure out how to navigate their emotions, trying how to navigate their physical bodies, trying to continue to create their connection, their source connection to the 5th dimension and above, while being in a human body, which we know is not an easy thing to do.
yeah, yeah. So why did Atlantis fall then? Or you said there were 5 different times it
Yes.
fell. Like, what happened with that? Like,
So every Atlantean expression was an experiment. It was experiment by Prime Creator and the beings that work with Prime Creator to see if beings could come from the higher realms, right? From a higher consciousness realm, spirit realm, be in a third dimensional body with all the emotions and the foibles of being human, and stay connected to God, to remember that they were God. And so it was an experiment. Many people think that Atlantis was a failure, like all 5 times it failed. That's true from one's perspective, but the bigger picture is it was an experiment. And like with every experiment, you have to add a variable. And the variable would be, how can we mess up the experiment? Like, how can we jack with the experiment and see if these beings can truly remember they are God? So were things like technology that was inserted into the picture. It's technology, AI, human emotions, the idea of competitiveness, the idea of, the law of one. Could they sustain the law of one with all these other things, all these other distractions happenings, and ultimately, because of, some people call it the dark forces or the dark energy, because they were allowed to come in and participate in the experiment as the variable. The experiment ended. Atlantis, the people of Atlantis, in every occasion came up out of balance with nature. They came out of harmonization with all of God and life, and the natural flow of the cycles intended for the planet. And so, you hear the stories about the tsunamis came and the earthquakes came and all the things came that completed the experiment, which we are now in a brand new experiment.
wait, one thing I heard from I follow, I'm a big fan of Gerald Clark. Like, he talked about that he thought that maybe Enki was Poseidon, Enki
Yes.
with the Anunnaki, and that Poseidon went and he started Atlantis and he married a human, which her name was Cleto or something like that. Do you follow that
So
line, or do
yes,
you?
Enki is Poseidon. And so, there's a lot of talk right now about, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and little Enki, the fighting brothers, right? It doesn't matter. Like there's a lot of controversy about who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. In my understanding, Poseidon/Enki was the developer. He was a Merlantian. He was the ruler of, the Water Kingdom, and he was the one who he and Metatron co-created Atlantis. At least in the fifth and final, which is the one I'm closest to. So yes, I do believe that's probably truth that Poseidon married. And, that lineage has continued on through that union and some of the other unions, like with Yemaya, that Poseidon had, that has led to the incarnation of many, many, many Mer people on this planet today.
I was gonna say that because, like, wait, because I know you say that, like, you come from a line of Mer people that originated in Orion or Mintaka, right? So is that did they like terraform your people, the Mer people here onto Earth, or how did the transition go? Like,
So Mintaka, which is the westernmost star in Orion's belt, is the blue water planet. And that is the stargate through which the family of the family of Mu came to Earth. So the family of Mu was made up of all kinds of different, from different star system and races, many, many Aquiferian beings. There are many Aquiferian beings, not just what you would see as the typical mermaid. There
yeah.
are many beings of the water who came through that stargate of Mintaka, and we rested there for a little while, preparing to come to Earth. So for a very long time, I felt Mintaka was home. And the reason I felt it was home, and it is in a way, is that's where we all came and spent time and prepared the original Aquiferians, the original Mer, who fell to Earth with original water known as liquid plasma light at the inception of the Earth. So when the Earth was first formed, the Aquiferians that came to Earth with the other cetaceans came from Mintaka and the liquid plasma light of Mintaka, which became original water for the planet. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So, do you feel like the Mer people thrived here, or do you think they had problems here? How were their interactions with humans? I know a lot of sailors saw them,
Yeah.
but they thought it was like an illusion. Talk about that a little bit. I think that's interesting to get into.
So for a very long time, eons of time, the Mer did just fine with the liquid plasma light in the water. That's all there was, while land masses were becoming formed. And it's kind of hard. There's so many different like lines of time and different ways we could go with this. Mer people only had the problems that the Mer people ultimately had were being hunted eventually for who we were and what we knew, and the water grids that we held the water grids along with the dolphins and the whales. Think about the dolphins and the whales and the slaughtering of them. The reason that they're trying to be destroyed is because they hold the integrity of the water together, as do the Mer. So, that what we would call the quote dark forces would be after the Mer beings also, because we are so integral to water as essentially the most important memory holder and substance. Water holds the memory of everything that's ever happened on this planet. It holds the records of everything that was and everything that ever will be. The same water that is here today on the planet is the same water you have urinated out, sweated out, that's been absorbed up to the clouds and come back down. It's the same water that has always been here on the planet, holding the memories of everything. So Mer only really got in trouble or had problems when the dark forces began to hunt us and forced us into kind of more of a hiding or a cloaking, you could say. And that's really what Merlantis was all about. Merlantis was cloaked from anyone who was not of the same frequency or vibration allowed to enter. We were never infiltrated once the cloaking came in place. And I remember carrying, and many of you are listening who know you are Mer, might recall wearing a crystal, a special crystal embedded either in your high heart or maybe in your third eye, that would be like the homing device that would allow us to always find our way back to Merlantis no matter where we were, and nobody could follow us. It's like that cloaking device came on and we were allowed to enter and exit and nothing could find us. Should I pause there for a second?
Yeah, I was gonna say, does that mean like you would not have a problem with like sea predators, like like sharks, or I mean, like how do they get along with mer people, or is it like kind of like because you're so much in harmony with the ocean that they don't bother
for
you?
the most part, great. Now, some of the creatures of the sea are not natural. They're inorganically created, just like we have inorganic creations now. Sirens are actually a product of Atlantis, of genetic experiments gone wrong. Because anytime you try to take what's natural and match it with unnatural, and we see so much of that, the cloning and so forth happening now on this timeline. Anytime you take an organic and mix it with an inorganic, it doesn't come out. It's not right. It's not made of God. It's not made of light and not made of nature. So sirens, the ones that the sailors used to see, that would, call them in as beautiful mermaids and then transform into these hideous creatures, were actually inorganically created from the experiments in Atlantis.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Now, I want to get into. I'll get into some of the topics that you gave me. Now, those were most of the questions I had. Well, I have more, but
okay.
I want to get into some of these. I have more actually. I'm trying to think of where to go with this. What would be the best way? Okay, let's go into this. What about the war between Atlantis and Lemuria? Like, why did that happen? And and when did that occur? Was that during the fifth incarnation, or what was that before that?
So first there was Mu. Mu was the motherland, and Mu eventually became Lemuria. And so many of you listening will resonate more with the Lemurian energy. And there's also kind of a thing that I call the shadow Atlantis, that exists in many people who resonate with Lemuria because of what happened between the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. So the Lemurian experiment was first, and the Lemurians, of course, were very, very earth, heart-centered, very nature-centered, benevolent type of beings who lived that way for, eons and eons of time. And when the Atlantean experiment was conceived of, it was meant to be a complement to the Lemurian experiment, meaning the Lemurians were very left-brained, right-brained, and very creative and very natural, the feminine. The Atlanteans were more right-brained, left-brained, and scientific, technological advancements, and the masculine. And there was a designation for them to be complements to one another. Some were masculine, some were feminine in body, some were more androgynous. And it was all meant to be a symbiotic harmonization of energies, like we have the masculine and feminine in all of us. And at some point, the left-brain Atlanteans felt themselves, because of the dark infiltration and in the spirit of competition and in the spirit of losing the acknowledgement of the law of one, where law of one states everything is equal under the creator. Everything and everyone in the eyes of the creator is equal. There is no competition. There is no better. Nothing and no one is of more value. So in the spirit of forgetting the law of one and the rest of the spiritual laws of Atlantis, the Atlanteans began to discover themselves or think of themselves as superior because of their technological and scientific advancements than the Lemurians. The Lemurians never forgot. The Lemurians always stayed connected and always stayed congruent with the creator. They always stayed harmonized with the earth. So when the attack started on the Lemurians, the enslavement, and trying to utilize them as a battery and as a power source instead of acknowledging their humanity, when that began to happen, there was a war between the two civilizations, a very terrible war that led to the destruction of the Lemurian people and the enslavement of them. And ultimately, many Lemurians feel some kind of way against the Atlanteans. And even today, I run into Lemurians who like, I want nothing to do with Atlantis. I remember you people, and you're rotten. You ruined my people, right? And
Yeah.
and when in fact, a part of my mission is to be a bridge between the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, to be a bridge in the realization of the healing between those two civilizations, because the fallout between the masculine and feminine of Atlantis and Lemuria was the macrocosmic event that led to the split, or the perceived split, between the masculine and the feminine within humanity. Everything that happens on the macro scale translates to us, because we are the universe, on the microcosmic scale. So one of the most important missions in ascension, and we hear this all the time, balance your masculine and feminine. Look at your shadows. And that's because of what happened between Atlantis and Lemuria. The healing between those two civilizations. And, my sun sign is Pisces, which is Lemurian. My rising is Aquarius, which is Atlantean, and my moon is Libra. So I even wrote into my chart that I would come as an emissary between these two civilizations, because I too came from Lemuria. I came with the family of Mu. I came as Mer. I was in the water all through Lemuria. It wasn't till the fifth and final incarnation that I would come up out of the water and participate with the Atlantean society. And I also consider them my family.
That's interesting. So what to talk a little bit about the Mer and the Divine Feminine? Like, what can you talk about the Mer's like purpose with the Divine Feminine?
Yes. So you've been noticing over the last, I don't know, maybe decade at least, that mermaid iconography is everywhere. Every little girl wants to be a mermaid. There's mermaid tails all over the place. Like the idea and the imagery of the Mer people, and particularly the mermaids, is huge. It has come out of the collective unconscious as, a myth or mythology. The tales of sailors come into the collective consciousness of the Mer people are a living, breathing civilization. Mer people have incarnated on this planet in droves. And when I first came out with my YouTube channel, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, when I stepped into my Mer origins as my soul truth and began talking openly about being Mer and the Mer civilization, I actually really thought I'd get a lot of pushback, and I thought I'd get a lot of people making fun of me and like thinking I was some kind of weirdo. And that did not happen. Instead, I had many, and continue to have many women and some men coming forward and saying, thank you, because I feel that I have a Mer soul. I feel that my soul is of the Mer being. So thank you for speaking about it. We go back sometimes into a soul progression or regression and reconnect with their Mer self. And the same with people who have star children, fairies, angelics. All of us come from some of other realm and reality, and all we really need is someone to walk us into our soul truth so we can validate what we know to be true. The Mer people have incarnated in droves because we are, of course, seeing the rise of the divine feminine. The resurgence of the divine feminine template that is meant to be an equal and opposite with the divine masculine. That marriage or that merger, that return of Atlantis and Lemuria coming back together is happening through the Mer people who originated as Lemurian or Mu, the family of Mu. And some of us still are stronger than Lemurian, but many of us are the Atlantean, here to restore the divine feminine templates for humanity.
That's interesting. Now, I heard you say there are mer on other planets like Sirius, and where
Yes.
exactly is there like large populations of mer women? And are there mer men too? What would you
Oh, of
say?
course. Yes, absolutely. The mermen, they don't, I think that there are, because it's so thought of as sort of a feminine thing to be a merman, which really it's not. The mermen I remember are Neptunian, Triton, Poseidon. They're that very masculine, not overtly masculine like us, but that very masculine, protective, creative, in unison with the feminine. And I think there's a lot of mermen out there who are elected to come forward if they feel like, well, I'm really a manly man and I don't want to look like, what are people going to think if I say I'm a merman? Because the stereotype of mermen and the men who are coming out tend to be more effeminate, which is fine, but it's important for you to know if you resonate with the Poseidon, the Triton, the Neptune iconography, that mermen are needed, wanted, and just as divine masculine as anything you would see from any other star system or reality.
That's fascinating. And then one thing I wanted to ask you about is what are the five rays, and what is
Oh,
that? What
okay.
does
Oh,
that
and I
mean?
didn't finish your question about Mer and other star. There's many, many star systems that contain Aquiferians, and Aquiferians are simply just beings of the water. So come outside of the paradigm of, the mermaid with the tail. And by the way, we don't look like the beautiful stereotypical mermaids that you see in the drawings. We actually look more fish-like for the most part. We resemble more, more like a fish or a water creature than we do a human. Uh, Oftentimes, when we transform and show ourselves, we do take on more humanoid aspects because it doesn't scare people. It won't scare you if you see something that looks more human rather than if you see something, maybe with some big eyes or fish lips or something like that. So that's the reason we see the iconography as looking very human, is because it makes humans more comfortable.
That's interesting. Now, back to what are the five rays? What does that mean?
Okay, so there are five water rays, five water soul rays. So we have all, or many of us have heard of like a blue ray. If some of us consider ourselves to be blue ray beings, that is different than having an elemental ray, which is a water ray. So not are there water rays, there are also fire, earth, and air rays. Okay, and these are elemental rays that if you resonate with mer or water, that you carry one or more of the five in your oversoul essence, and they can be utilized to execute, well, essentially different forms of water healing and healing for humanity on the planet. So I am an activator of the water soul rays. I went through an initiation with spirit maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and have some hand sigils that allow me to activate and open those and help others with them. And so they are turquoise, aqua, blue violet, sky blue, and cobalt blue. And they all have a specific, and of course there's many colors of blue, but these are the five major water rays that if you resonate as a water being, you will hold one, two, or three, sometimes up to five of them in your essence, to be able to execute your job or your mission out on the planet through the energy of and the element of water.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting. And the last question I have for you is about the original water that you talk about. The
Yes.
original water in Mintaka. What's that mean?
So original water, when water first came to Earth, it was not like the water we know now. Water is from outer space, and it was more like the closest thing you could compare it to would be like an amniotic fluid. It was a plasma. It was a birthing type of fluid that came from Mintaka. And the reason it had to come in that form and make a transformation is so that, everything in my understanding was essentially birthed. We're all birthed from water. And if you think about, human baby, all babies coming from an amniotic fluid, growing in an amniotic sac. It is the sustenance, the high vibrational substance and frequency that contains and grows life. So over eons of time, the liquid plasma light would transform more into water as we know it today. But the original form was this liquid plasma light from Mintaka that was the birthing place of all life forms.
Wow, that's cool. This is so interesting. Like, I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we finish up for today?
Gosh, did I hit all the list of everything? Wait, let's talk about Atlantis, and let's talk about the new Earth Atlantis.
Okay.
Let's talk about what I call the new Earth Atlantis and the Atlantean timelines that are birthing, and how we are course correcting the fall of Atlantis 13,000 years ago. Okay, so about 13,000 years ago, we had Atlantis. That was, the experiment was terminated. Okay, and some of those beings, went on to Egypt and some other places to resettle, recalibrate. But we have this timeline that when Atlantis fell, really reverberated out and ripple affected out to affect all of the cosmos, every star system, all of it, because there were representatives and community from everywhere that lived on Atlantis. So we are attempting now, and we see the timelines of Atlantis. We see them how they're repeating themselves through everything that's happening today, right? Through the AI and through the technology over nature, and through propaganda, and through this unnatural tendency we all have to compete instead of unite, or to materialism over what's natural. And so we on December 20th, the winter solstice, 21st, you remember when we had that a conversion of Saturn and Jupiter? We had that grand conjunction in the skies as the solstice started.
Yeah.
It was a really big date in astrology. It was a very big date for the planet, because on that date, December 21st, winter solstice, during that grand conjunction, we began to reverse the spiral of Atlantis. So we've been spiraling, and everything's becoming very big and very huge and really very, very dire right now, as all these things are happening, trying to get people to wake up, trying to get humanity to understand and reconnect reestablish their sovereignty and their connection to the Godhead. So the Atlanteans were fifth dimensional beings who came into a third dimensional body. That was the experiment. Can you hang on to that fifth dimensional consciousness? In this experiment, we are third dimensional beings attempting to remember and fully reestablish our connection to fifth dimension and above. That's what ascension is. It's a reversal of the experiment. This has never been done before. Okay. And so as we pass through that centrifugal center point of reversing the spiral of Atlantis, right? Rewinding, redirecting the course, we are again in this very important, potent space where things are so extreme, and probably will be for a while, that we have no choice, if we want to truly ascend, but to go into that 0 point space of neutrality within, despite all these things that are happening, besides all the 5G grids that are being imposed upon us, the mandates that are imposed upon us, the propaganda, all these things, and fully anchor into ourselves as eternal beings, as part of God. Atlantis fell in part because the beings forgot that they were eternal. They thought that they were soul passing through an experience, and were actually eternal. When Atlantis fell, the panic, the grief, the lamenting, all the human emotions of blame, shame, and guilt is a really, really big one. Blame, shame, and guilt, which is a template for humanity, abandonment, which is a base template for humanity, it all happened during that last fall of Atlantis. Okay, so we have been trying to heal our shame, our guilt, all that lower chakra stuff, our fear, our abandonment, okay, on this reality and timeline. And so as we pass through that centrifugal center point and recreate our 13 chakra emotion, our 13 chakra template, which is what I work with, fortify our energy field, we're collapsing the shame, the guilt, the abandonment that has held us in bondage since then and before. Okay, and so as we begin to uncoil and rewrite the spiral of Atlantis, and the reason we need to repeat the spiral is like any pattern. Unless you make a new pattern, you are destined to the same pattern over and over again. So we are rewriting, recreating the patterns within ourselves, okay, learning about self-love, self-awareness, self-worth, learning about love being really the only thing that is real, and embodying that sovereignty of ourselves through and with the creator that show us, or that tell us the truth is that we are eternal beings. There is no death. There is nothing to fear. Just keep walking. Just keep growing. Just keep expanding, living your joy, living your truth, living your dreams, living your authentic true self, and together. And the good news is it's not going to take 13,000 years to recreate the last spiral. It's going to happen very, very quickly once we get through, I believe, once we make it through this decade, which I think is still going to continue to be very, very challenging. Okay, make it through this decade, and then we know these structures are destined to fall. We know the financial and all the things that are happening, all these corporate structures that keep us out of alignment, all the technology, and technology is our friend. We're ultimately be able to learn because of the consciousness that's growing up through us, consciousness in humanity, the earth changes that will ultimately take place. Learn to utilize these things that are here to assist us in a way that is in harmonization with the creator once again. I know that was a lot. Thank you.
No, that's fascinating. It's interesting. Like, so how long do you think this all happens? Like, what do you think we have a
Oh man,
timeline?
I would love to know that number. I would love to give you a date. In my personal opinion, it was not supposed to take this long. I believe when, the early indigos and the star people began to incarnate, I think we underestimated a little bit the severity and the intensity and the challenges that were going to come in place for this mission. I believe, all the new children that have come in that we all kind of thought, yeah, they're going to come in and they're going to remember and they're going to awaken. Some of them have, and some of them are. But, many of these generations have really got caught up in technology and AI and GMOs, and the Kardashians and all of the things. And many of these generations who were coming after the indigos, and even some of the indigos, we forgot what we were here to do because of the programs and the grids, the frequencies that have been put in place that have really made it harder than what I remember thinking it was supposed to be. So having said that, I do believe the final outcome for this planet is exaltation. I do believe we came here to ascend, that this is a no-fail mission. It is just going to keep the continuation of the alignment and the remembrance of not becoming so deeply emotionally triggered, because it's our emotional triggers that take us out of alignment. It takes us out of belief. It takes us out of our sovereignty. Remembering the law of one, remembering we are eternal beings. And should I leave today from this planet, or should I leave 50 years from now, or whenever, to see this whole experiment through, that there is no death for me, that I am consistently, totally in unison, harmonization with my oversoul and with God.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, I want to thank you so much. Can you tell everybody where to find you? And yeah, this was amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
If you could tell everybody like what kind of services you offer too, I
Okay.
think that would be really cool. Yeah.
So I am an Atlantean light body and DNA activator through your 13 chakra template and your aura. That's one thing we can do together. I teach courses on the great kingdom of Atlantis and activating your Atlantean light body and DNA, and stepping deeper into the 7 spiritual laws of Atlantis. Past life regression or soul progression therapy, where either I can take you through hypnosis to your own soul records, simultaneous life, to your planet of origin, to your your angels, your guides, or ultimately your soul, because connection to your soul and your soul records is ultimately most important. Intuitive readings, Atlantis reconnection, soul, Atlantis or reconnection, Lemurian reconnections, and also I steward Andaras. I remember Andaras also from Atlantis, illuminating the temples and the caves. And so Andara treasure chest is where you can find those kind of tools if you're looking for a pendant or a piece of Andara to help you on your evolution. AmeeraAtlantis.com is my website. Ameera_Atlantis11 for Instagram. And then Andara Treasure Chest also on Instagram if you would like to connect, as well as my YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And until next time, we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would love to be back, Rob. Thank you for having me and allowing me to express myself.
All right. Have a good night. Nice meeting you.